Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 9, Episode 19 of our weekly Q&A videos / podcasts. If you are on the YouTube video right now, links in the description to access it on podcasting platforms. And if you are on one of the podcasting platforms right now, I would hope you already know about our YouTube channel, BDCKR Gaming. But if not, I guess now you do. Do we have any housekeeping or anything you want to talk about particularly this week before we just get into questions?
No, questions it is.
Okay. So there we go. Our first one comes from Corin Com. And they say, don't really have any questions, but wanted to say I actually maxed out all of my basic / crit boosting gears for Flashpoint Batman. Also, you said in your newest Q&A, you said that you studied Latin. Not sure which one of you, but just thought that was pretty cool, as I also started studying Latin a little while ago. I started learning it because my mom wanted me to, but was wondering why you started learning Latin. And so, did you learn Latin? You did, right?
Did.
You had to.
I had it in grade 9.
Yeah.
Our school required it.
Yeah. So you learned Latin, but a little less than me.
A lot less. And a lot longer ago.
A while ago. And yeah. I gotta say, I haven't, maintained my Latin knowledge. And obviously, you having learned it 1 year and just in grade 9, just when it was mandatory, clearly you weren't my push to learn Latin either.
No.
So I just learned it because... So at the high school I went to, you might actually be able to figure out what high school I went to if you know where I am based off of what I'm about to tell you. Because not a lot of high schools in my area taught Latin. There was a very few. There was actually, I think, only one that you could go to that's like a public school.
Right.
And so I went to this one in my area that taught Latin. And that was actually one of the reasons I went to the high school. And it wasn't because I'm a huge language nerd, right? Like, I've taken French, and I had a pretty bad French teacher in my leading up to high school, in my sort of elementary school days. And so I didn't have any passion for learning other languages. I don't know any other languages. But we had sort of an opportunity to go into schools, and they had these sort of orientation meetings. And I walked into the Latin classroom, and it was instantly like no sort of elementary school or high school classroom I had ever seen, because there was like a huge number of books along the wall, and not like textbooks, like different like Latin history books, and just it was a book collection, right? It was like a little mini Latin themed library, and then on the bookshelf on top of it there was all of these little projects. So there was one of those, I forget what they're even called. It's one of those spiral things with a crank at the top that you can use to crank water up an incline. It's like the tube with the screw shape in the middle. And then there was all these like glass, like blue, like pebbles that were simulating the rocks, and you could crank it and watch the water come out the top. And there was like a little mini sort of trebuchet that was actually made out of what looked like, like stained like wood. There was, fake swords, tridents. There was mosaics on the wall.
What makes something a trebuchet instead of what's the common?
A catapult?
Catapult.
I think how catapults work is they're based off of tension and cranked tension, whereas a trebuchet is based off of weight. There's a weight on one side, and it's based off of the swing of that weight to launch it.
A counterweight.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of them uses mechanical energy stored by twisting, and the other one uses gravitational potential energy stored by a weight that's been lifted.
Very good.
That's what I believe, anyways. I'm not 100% sure, but that's my understanding.
Okay.
And it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, right?
It sounds kind of wrong, because as a category, I've seen that distinction that you're mentioning. Whether that's the basis for the names, I don't know, but it sounds incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, so it was just this room that was like really like warm and just like packed with cool stuff. And then the teacher started, talking and sort of gave his pitch as to why Latin was important. And he was cool too.
Right.
And I was just like, this is like the kind of space that, like, if I'm, as somebody who at different times, like, I've liked school more or less, right, at different times, and it has depended a lot on the teacher and the sort of environment, because I think really that's what it is. I think if you have the right environment for you, obviously everybody's different, right? So school is not going to be for some people no matter what, and that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of people, school could be for them, with the right teacher
right.
and in the right environment.
Right.
Whether or not people had that experience in their life, I think unfortunately a lot of people don't. But I've had enough really good teachers that there have been times where I've been like, yeah, school is for me. And I've obviously had a lot of times where I've had bad teachers and I'm like, this is miserable.
Yeah.
And this type of school isn't for me. But I was like, wow, that, seems like the kind of thing I want to do. And I'm like, and there's 3 years of Latin, and then there's like a classical civs course that a lot of people take in like their last
civilization.
year. Yeah, civilizations.
Yeah.
Like I could do that. And I was choosing between 2 high schools where we're sort of not located that much closer to one than the other. We're close to the middle of them.
One is walkable.
Well, they're both walkable.
I think this one, the one that you didn't go to, is maybe more walkable.
But I walked most days home from the other one, the one that I did go to. So if you're saying that the other school is more walkable, the school I ended up going to I did walk it like a lot of days. But yeah, so I was like, that's really cool. And so that teacher, he just totally sold me. Yeah. And I took Latin and I really enjoyed it. And it was great. Like we would do like bingo, like one of like the pre-test like vocabulary stuff would be like a bingo game where you would make your bingo card based off of the list. So it was like everything that was good about that could be good about tests, right. Where you were given like lists of vocabulary and each row you had to do something different. You either had to translate English words to Latin or translate them back, or look at like what case a certain word was in, right. For like the grammar stuff. And so that was cool. And you had a list that was longer than, what you had to write down. So you got to pick and choose which questions you answered, which is always good. And then the other thing was that you were actually building out your bingo card with it. And then you would actually play bingo with it. And if you got like the first line, column, or row or whatever, you'd get cookies. So it was actually like a real game of bingo with like actual stakes in the middle of your day. And you just did a bunch of stuff like that. That made it a really cool environment. And all of those things that, I was so enamored with when I first came into the room were projects that were part of your final project. So you would do something related to Roman life. And then you would do like a little write-up associated with it, right. And like why it was authentic. And you get marked based off of that. So for 1 year I did a mosaic, and for another year I did a translation of an original Latin text, and then a recreation of that text in like a font that was conceivably like a handwritten font for the Latin of the time. So looking at like the lettering that they might have used in that time, and then I did it on like a piece of parchment feeling like paper with my friend's calligraphy pen. And so it was a cool class, and it made me care a lot about it. And so that's why I took Latin. I took Latin because there was a really great teacher and a really sort of cool space that he'd cultivated, and it made me excited to take it. And then he it wasn't just a cool promise of the class. Right. It was a really good follow through too that made me really enjoy my time with it.
And didn't you get one of those old coins? Wasn't that part of the story too?
That was part of the story. So
the orientation, from what I remember, is that the orientation had some sort of participatory activity. Yeah. And you could win these neat, cool, ancient coins.
Yeah, you could win an ancient Roman coin. Yeah. And what was very funny was this is the one sort of thing that was a little bit of a bamboozle, which was that he said like, oh, like I give these to like my students because I think it's like important, blah, 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 whatever the spiel was. And then when I went into the class, I remembered him saying that, and he never handed out the coins. And I said, hey, man. And so then he gave me one. But then he had a sort of, he'd do this thing where he'd give you a little like wry smile. And they go, you got me. And so he gave me one, but he didn't have one for the whole class.
That's like the no prize for Marvel. Marvel comic books used to have this thing called the no prize. Mm-hmm. When you did something neat, or when there's something, just the idea of writing into letter columns. You know what it was?
It was no prize?
It was no prize. It was nothing. You would get nothing. It was just basically somebody saying, oh, you got no prize. That was the prize. Yeah. Having somebody respond to you in the letter column.
Yeah, so that was a little funny. But it was like, it's the whole thing. And it was, there was like, they organized events and stuff. Yeah. There was like classics movie nights.
Okay. Yeah. And there was was it Latin class that had those excursions downtown?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me as you're talking about it. What's funny is, I don't know that I never ever made this connection before, but you know what I've said about panels, where when you go to convention, it matters less what the topic is. I've been disappointed more often by the topics when they seemed interesting.
Yeah.
And I've been very rarely disappointed if I go to panel just because I know this person is an interesting speaker. And the connection here is that very rarely do you hear, when you meet an expert on some topic who's really good at it and really enjoys it and really is sort of on top of the game, more often their origin story has to do with a good teacher than it has to do with, well, this subject was just so super duper interesting that I taught it all myself. And I was not inspired by any individual. They had no impact on me, and I just did it because I had to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, all those times where you see one teacher who has an outsized kind of influence and impact on their students, so that a bunch of them end up following that same topic.
And I know at least one person who like double majored, and one of their majors was Latin because of Latin in high school. And so definitely that's why I took Latin. And I guess if there's anything for people who aren't me to take out of the story, other than learning something interesting about some random dude on the internet, is that if you see those kind of cool opportunities, take them, right? For classes, especially if you're in high school or anything past high school where you have electives and options to explore. I have taken some interesting classes. I took some really crummy electives too, but every elective that I took where I went for something that I thought would be interesting was either a really good time or gave me some fun stories. So those kind of weird stuff. I also took a class that I thought was equity, diversity, and social justice class.
And it was
it was, but only technically it was equity, diversity, and social justice through the lens of spoken word and hip hop. And that was a really weird time. I think maybe we'll talk about that some other time because we're already 12 minutes in.
Right. And we haven't finished answering not necessarily the question, but I actually wanted to respond to the injustice part of Corncom's comment, where they mention, I actually maxed out all my basic / crit boosting gears for Flashpoint Batman. And the one thing I do want to point out is we did a bit of an analysis that was mathematical, and practically it sort of played out true when you play Flashpoint, is that because of his passive boosting crit damage so much, your priority really should be maxing out crit chance, number one. So crit boosting is sort of ambiguous. It could be boosting crit damage or boosting crit chance. But crit chance is the most important until you get to 100%. Yeah. Once crit chance is boosted and you're doing a basic damage loadout, then you want to boost basic damage as much as you can. And if you've done that with all 3 slots, boost basic damage. And you don't need all 3 slots, but as long as the crit chance is 100%, then it makes sense to boost crit damage. But before that, there's really no point. Because boosting crit damage is an opportunity cost. If you could actually increase crit chance, that'll do better than that 50% crit damage boost. If you can increase basic damage, that'll do more than increase the crit damage boost, because it multiplies already because of his passive and whatever crit chance you've already got in augmented. Yeah. So just an important thing, like if you're going to really get the most out of Batman, because the difference can be huge. Yeah.
So there we go.
Oh, my Latin origin story. Teacher was awful. Didn't enjoy it. I did pick up some basic stuff. Like there's certain things that I still remember, and like, plural of US is I, plural of A is AE, plural of UM is A as male, female, and what's the not neutral? Is it neuter? Is it neuter case? Maybe that's it. I don't know. And it was the one thing, there's what's funny. I don't know why it occurs to me now. There's certain things that never made sense to me. Like all my classmates seem to get it, where they would say, "Oh, this is the root word for this, and this is the root word for this." But I didn't have the words for
derivatives,
or no, the language for it. But because English is such a bastard language and it comes not just from Latin, I'd say, but it also looks like this other word that it has no connection to. So why is that? And I didn't know that then. And I have the context for it now. But those kind of things always bug me.
Yeah.
Sort of, and here's another jump. Again, don't know why it occurs to me now. Geography. One thing that they used to explain to me was that when it rained, there would be a reservoir.
Yeah.
And it would be the water flowing from the rain coming out of the reservoir.
Yeah.
I said, but why doesn't it just run dry? Like the context that I had was, you pour a glass.
Yeah.
You can't pour it forever.
Yeah.
It just runs out. So why doesn't a river run out?
Yeah.
And nobody ever really, and I said, but that doesn't make sense. And, my classmates would say,
yeah, because it goes from point A to point B, so how does it get back?
So, yeah, exactly. And why doesn't it just empty? Like, how do you, to me, the problem, and it's still not a simple one, but to explain how the scale of it matters so much, that when you have water spilling out of whatever reservoir at the top, why doesn't most of it just all spill out at once?
Yeah.
And so, an hour or 2 hours later, it's all gone.
Yeah.
How is the cycle of water continuous enough that you maintain flow?
For both the language and the reservoir, that's an issue of understanding like context and scale.
Right. But nobody ever did that. Like to them, I guess, and I don't know that anybody in that class was necessarily a lot smarter than me, but the fact that it didn't occur to anybody that mattered and that there's a part of the explanation that was missing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, the thing that I've mostly taken from Latin, which is I think objectively the wrong thing to take from Latin, or maybe not, right? Because depending on how much I need it, I don't think I need it in my day-to-day, is I remember the stories, because we had the Cambridge Latin textbook, and the way that worked was that there was actually, there was a story and a narrative and characters, and they sort of start you out by just introducing you to people, and then there's genuinely like sort of funny and interesting and cool stuff where you follow this family, and it's this family in Pompeii, and like the end of the first book is the volcano erupting, so it's all these people who you've studied over a semester, and a lot of them just die, and there's like the cook.
But how do you know they die if there's no narrator that survives?
Well, they just tell you. Well, not all of them die. Most of them die. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's different stories, but it's like Grumio did this, whatever. And so then you've got this, like they try to do a deal with a guy, and he's like, "Hey, can I borrow some money?" And then he's like, "I'm an honest merchant. I always give back my money. Right. I'm not a liar. Mendax liar. And
mendacity.
And so like I remember like pecunium quaerit is like asking for money, right? Pecunium is money. And so I remember stuff from the stories, and I also remember that there's they have their slaves, and one cook, Grumio, once gets really drunk and then confuses a painting of a lion for a real lion, and then tries to fight it. And so just stuff like that. And so it was genuinely a really sort of interesting class, because there's not a lot of other spaces, and you learn almost immediately swear words. Forky fair, I'll let you.
Forky fair?
Yeah. And they say like scoundrel is like the translation in class, and then my teacher was like, that does not mean scoundrel. He's like, I'm not allowed to tell you the word that it means. You can imagine what it is based off of what it seems like it would be, because it's pretty similar to English. Right. But if you call somebody a forky fair, yeah, and so that was fun, Normally, when you know how people always go like...
They sanitize the language, right?
Well, people always go, the first thing that you learn in another language is like the profanity from like your friends.
Conversationally.
Yeah.
But the first thing that you learn in school for language is not that. If anything, you never learn it in school because it's all sanitized.
But then in this case, we did. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, is that you get the sort of like learning it from a friend experience. Right. But from your teacher, if they're cool. And my teacher certainly was. So yeah, that was my experience with Latin.
Speaking of inspirations, I don't know that there was any class I ever took in high school that inspired me enough to follow that. Yeah. But there was one teacher that I appreciate, two teachers I appreciate a lot. One who enjoyed reading science fiction and fantasy and would loan me some of his books. Nice. Inspired me to read a lot. He's the reason I found Gene Wolfe in the Book of the New Sun. Nice. And I understood because some of the covers were so distinctive that I learned who Don Mites was as a cover artist, even though the books are totally forgettable and obscure and have fallen off, like they're none of the important canon.
Yeah.
And one teacher who used to coach our math league team. So I guess in the States they called them mathletes. We never did. We were just math league competitors, which is funny. It's a funny thing, like it's how it's similar, but it's not actually the same
Now
thing.
here's my question.
Yeah.
Is it lamer to be called a mathlete or to have no name, to not even get a name? Which one's less cool?
I don't know that there's, when you talk about how uncool it was, I don't know that there's any sort of distinction to be made at the bottom of the barrel.
That's what
right? Like at that, when you're that low. I mean, listen, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was it was the most enriching experience that I had at school. And the cool thing, again, it was the teacher, I think, that made all the difference. He was my science teacher in grade 11 and 10. And he was one of my math teachers. So I took all three maths in grade 13. Yeah. Algebra.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not punching down, because I have also participated in is it intramural when it's between schools?
Inter is between, intra is within.
Yeah, is intramural when you compete against other schools?
Right.
Yeah, because I've been in an intramural science competition in high school. Yeah. So I'm not I'm not in any position.
You're not throwing stones?
And also, I don't think it matters. I think you do what you like and are good at. So if there's some sort of math or science competition that you have an opportunity to participate in, who cares?
I wish school did a better job of both encouraging people who already liked it and encouraging people who struggled with it. Like that there was a different way to reach people. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I think I saw this online recently, where the really good gifted programs focus less on the ability than they do on the enthusiasm. Mm. And that this affinity can benefit so much more from the guided kind of teaching than the knowledge. And the problem that you experience in gifted is that some privileged families see gifted as some sort of good thing, that it doesn't matter whether they have affinity, and it's an opportunity to network with other people who have sort of an expertise or that are successful in school.
Well, and the thing is that's actually kind of true, right? That you see that research, right, where they will tell like a teacher that like there's these students who are like special and they'll pick the names out of a hat, and the kids who are purported to be special, like extra smart or whatever, and whoever gets extra attention do better. And they've just found that if you know, if a teacher or an educator is primed to think that one kid is smarter, that kid will get more attention and more care, and they will end up doing better just because of that. And so there's this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where we try to put, I think that's one of the issues with the segmented teaching streams, is that we sort of predetermine, we're making value judgments about these children who have a huge amount of experience left ahead of them. And there's something to be said for giving people the tools to learn in the way that's best for them. Yeah. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have different accessibility options. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have accommodations for different support needs and different, ways of being. But I think the way that we sort of corral people off into different sort of sections, especially, younger, I think whenever it's somebody else doing it instead of people self-selecting, if you want to, be in a different space or environment, I think it sets a lot of people up for failure.
I think the principle is a good one, very much like orphanages. The principle is good with orphanages because you have kids who maybe don't have parents who could benefit from a supportive, loving environment. Yeah. Same way that, organizing kids so that each type of learner gets what they need. Yeah. The problem is the execution, where you divide these kids and then you let the teacher's unconscious or the assessor's unconscious bias influence how much resource is dedicated towards each group and how much potential there is. It's not that, they shouldn't be streamed according to low potential, medium potential, high potential. Yeah. It's that if you stream them according to what they would benefit the most from, and that their potential is very similar. Mm-hmm. Same, again, orphanages.
But, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because what you did was you didn't screen out the staff people well enough. Mm-hmm. You ended up with systems that actually hurt kids. Yeah. so that in a lot of ways, you know, maybe they got a roof over their head, but they really didn't benefit in a way that they should have from the system, the potential of the idea.
Yeah. It's because honestly, like if you're sorting kids, I feel like one of the best ways that you would be able to sort kids is based off of their ideal learning environment.
Right.
Right. Where you'd have people who maybe need a quiet space. Yeah. If they need to work or focus, or people who are okay with noise, or maybe even people who like need like music or whatever. There's different stuff, but basically like accommodating people's needs so that they can give their best effort,
right?
And not based off of what some arbitrary marker of who you think is going to be better off or worse off, like just in terms of like how good they are at, like quote good they are at school, right?
Right.
For whatever that means.
All right, so you know what's funny too? Here's a parallel. Same with phys ed in athletics. So as children, people were guided by both the ones that were good at it and the ones where they were guided often by an adult in their life or somebody who is in a position that had a way to contribute to to make their lives richer.
Yeah.
So they would be more interested or participate in sports more. And that time spent getting good, or that's time spent where they started off a little bit better than their peers, ends up getting encouraged so that they are more likely.
It's a feedback loop.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I guess the difference is with athletics, I think I might have said this before, maybe not necessarily on this channel, is that when you're young, you are considered, well, the skills that you need to be physically fit have less to do with what you need in high school. You need as an adult. As a kid, you have to be good. It has to be fun. If it's both of those things, you end up doing a lot more. If you're physically more active, you're healthier, you're stronger, you're faster, you have more endurance. As an adult, it's hygiene. The opportunities to be good at something are fewer. The opportunities to have something fun, you know, with team sports, harder because it takes way more organization, right? It's not like you've got a bunch of people who are there already in school and you've got a captive audience, right?
And everybody's got a lot of free time when you're a kid.
Right.
Or a lot more anyways. I mean, it's not that every kid, everybody's situation is different. Right. But for a lot of kids anyways, your responsibilities sort of begin and end with whatever you don't screw up bad enough that your parents can sort of put on your plate. Right. To teach you a little bit of responsibility.
Yeah. And we talk about this, I think, like it's something relatively simple. I know it's not. I know it's hard. I know that the idea is good and that you have to be able to create a curriculum that does that is hard. But I feel like if you don't even try, then you're kind of doomed a little bit. And then you have to rely on these individual brilliant teachers to make up for it, and hoping that happens is, I think, too much of a crapshoot, and you spoil that, you waste that opportunity. Yeah, well, that's one of those things. There's a lot of stuff that people go, oh, well, that's really hard, right? And I think after a certain point, to some extent, I'm very practical. I'm pretty pragmatic in a lot of senses, right? But they'll go, oh, we can't do that. That's too hard. And sometimes when an idea is important enough, when the principle, when what you're shooting for is important enough, it's like, yeah, it's hard, but it's worth trying. You have to try to do it anyways. It just being hard isn't a good enough excuse not to do it. Because when we're talking about kids' development, that's really important. And here's the thing. If you're doing the wrong thing and getting it wrong, how about we, instead of doing the wrong thing and getting it wrong, let's aim it in the general direction of the right thing. And if you fall a little bit short, that's okay. This is the whole thing behind that you know, the enemy of good is... The enemy of perfect is good enough, or the enemy of great is good enough? No, the enemy of good is great, or perfect. The enemy of good is... whatever it is that... what stops some people from doing good is the idea that it's not perfect, so they just don't bother. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So... Yeah, I feel that pretty strongly. That's there'll be a lot of stuff where with policy decisions, and especially human rights stuff, where they'll go, oh, well, us figuring out this stuff, right? It'd be so hard, it'd be so complicated. And it's but we need to do something. Yeah. You gotta try to figure it out. And you maybe won't do a perfect job right away, but you gotta keep trying to figure it out. Just because it's hard, you can't sort of throw your hands up in the air and say it's not worth doing. And I think a lot of the ways that our school system is set up right now is very much... It's the same with a lot of our other systems. It's if you think about learning as empowerment, Yeah.
It's a system that's set up to sort of accumulate and collect that sort of capital of like education in the hands of relatively few people and sort of reinforce advantages instead of giving everybody opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, and now I'm looking at the next question while you're talking. I don't know if we have time for it, but I can make that next question tie into what we were just talking about.
Okay. Yeah, so Daniel Tolliver says, new viewer, old player. When I look at a channel, I normally go straight to what I'm looking for. Normally, I have an idea about what I want. Also, viewer request. When you guys do these, can you add timestamps? And so this was a response when I asked a while ago, talking about Bug Hunter cleaning up his channel. Right. And so this is, I go straight to what I want. This is not like I don't browse channels.
Right. So when I grabbed this question, I had a totally different answer. I mean, this has been asked a number of times in different ways, and we've had sort of different aspects
of the same answer.
Yeah. And I think this ties in perfectly, right? The enemy of good is best. So we try to do the best. If we were actually... So here's the thing. Timestamps, we don't have time to do it. If we were spending more time reading over stuff, we would probably do this less consistently than every week, because I'd have to listen to the things and not only start with the questions, but I think there's a lot of stuff, the interstitial stuff in between questions, where we don't actually address the things in the question and we sort of wander off. Those are probably as important to mark. I feel like that kind of content, to me at least, is closer to the kind of the reason why we do these, and we use the questions really only as an excuse and a takeoff point.
Yeah.
And if that were the case, but I can understand why that would be kind of neat, and it would be neat for me to be able to go back and look for stuff.
Yeah.
But
here's the thing: to make a podcast good, take a long time.
Yeah.
Take a lot of hours.
That's why we don't do it. That's why we don't do that.
That's why we make a podcast the quality that you're hearing right now.
Yeah.
It takes a really long time to sort of, like, if you're doing audio editing and cleanup, if you're doing sort of like pacing, if you're like trying to like cut out noises, if you've got like multiple people and like different spaces that you're combining the audio clips for. Like, we did that before, and we would literally just combine it once and then call it a day. We just match it up so that it was close enough.
And you can tell, and the proof of that are the times that you've listened to this and heard a phone ringing in the background.
Yeah. And then we're just like, oh my God. Well, yeah, because the thing is, we set aside, 45, 50 minutes for filming max, right?
Right.
And we make at least half an hour of stuff. So, we've got about a sort of 10, 15 minute buffer zone.
Is it even that much?
Of the actual film time.
Yeah, it feels like 10, 15 is,
at the
is
most.
More.
Yeah. So something happens, we're like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's in. You're getting half an hour of content that we, and that's not all the time that goes into it.
Right.
But that's like the amount of time that we're sitting here, like.
I'll tell you what, I'll make a promise to our audience right now. If this channel's still around, and if you guys are still listening in another 10 years when I retire, I might commit to making better videos.
Wow. That's something to look forward to. Stay tuned for that. 10 years.
And you know what's funny? I mean, I was going to joke, but 10 years is still longer than this channel has actually been productive. Although Injustice, I think, celebrated a 9-year anniversary recently.
Yeah, so a brisk 10 years from now, you maybe can expect those timestamps. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the original point I'd mentioned before we got into that, and it didn't occur to me that it was related to the other things, was one of the points I was going to mention that I thought was new is maybe that by dint of not putting in timestamps and making that sort of active choice, maybe we're curating and targeting our audience. Because really, with this kind of channel, the information, if you're looking for the information stuff, you're actually probably better off watching the multiplayer videos than listening to Q&A.
Yeah.
But the informational stuff, I think, is relatively thin gruel, and the benefit, well, maybe again, we're the creators, we're not the viewers. Yeah. The benefit to me has always been the conversations that we have, and like I said, the questions are takeoff point. They're really just an excuse to carve out time every week. We sit here, we talk about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something occurs to us, maybe it doesn't. We're open to the opportunity. And I think it's given us a few interesting moments that have been kind of fun.
I think at this point you pretty much have to be in it for us. Because if you're not, I cannot imagine what you would possibly get out of these videos.
It really, the wiki is probably going to be a better source of information than us.
Mm-hmm. But anyways, I think on that note, we're 10 years out from timestamps, maybe. Or you didn't say timestamps. You just said you'll make these better.
Better videos, better editing, better production values, maybe more like cleaner stuff. You know how when you watch John Green and Hank Green and there's cuts in the middle of it, they clearly took breaks or something happened and they had to edit it together.
Well, no, that's actually part of it, is that you have a script, you just read through sections and they do the cuts on purpose. That's like part of like how you keep your
right, but they do the pacing, but they cut out sections where there might be an inordinately
breathing
or
pausing or whatever.
Right, right. So that kind of stuff. Like I've seen, there's a couple of times where when I'm going over our audio, I click my teeth or something, like I, like the suck my teeth or whatever, and I've cut those out when I see them, but I know that a lot of times they're just still there. That kind of stuff I think is similar to what we see when they do those cuts on their videos.
Those sort of jump cuts where you're not changing the frame are a staple of YouTube, and they were popularized by YouTuber Zay Frank. So there we go, because they'll also be in like different positions, and they'll sort of there usually is some form of movement also that's at least partially on purpose. Where they're not sitting in the exact same place. They're not trying to make it like a hidden cut, right?
Right.
Where it has like full continuity. But anyways, so yeah, on that note, I think that brings us to the end of this week. So we'd like to give some shout outs. I'd like to give a shout out to Eliza Scared of Birds Caton. She's intimidated by birds. This shout out was brought to you by Chickadee-based intimidation. They're, quote, shaped like missiles. Apparently.
You would not like to be near our windows then if you're afraid of chickadees for the number of birds that come smacking in.
Well, I don't think there are chickadees that come by our windows. The chickadees are in a different area entirely. But chickadees are, I think, objectively one of the least scary birds.
Yeah, I think with the shorter their beak is and the smaller they are and the furrier they're, like the less their claws and make up their body.
Chickadees are pretty round and they're very light. I don't think they could do a lot of damage to you even if they wanted to.
And they make this really cool magazine.
Yeah, wow. That's a real sort of, I don't even know, is that an Ontario reference or a Canada reference? I don't even know how widely, the Chickadee magazine, but how widely is that even distributed?
I don't know, maybe so it's an in-joke. It's no longer an in-joke because we actually explained it, so it no longer is an Easter egg. Yeah. It is one of those jokes that you beat to death by explaining what it means.
I have a hard time believing that anybody would have gotten that, though, without this.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have just been for us otherwise.
That's true.
Anyways, but yeah, we'd also like to give a huge shout out to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
That would be Bombo Ben, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word. Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at your message here tier. Shawn, Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, Eddydoo, and Hoshi 127 at the credited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 241, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isra E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.